Data is clarity. To improve anything in life or in business, you need to know where you stand to begin with and where you stand at the end, to be able to measure your progress and see if you're improving in the direction that you want to improve. And us as human beings, we're not logical creatures. We like to think that we make logical decisions, but in most cases, we don't. We base our decisions on our biases, our emotions. Even the smartest people alive are not completely logical. It is what it is. But when you're trying to improve a specific metric in your business, then you want to be as logical as possible. And the only way to do that is to make decisions based on data that you actually have, not on your hunches and gut feelings. Your hunches and gut feelings are really good for creating hypotheses. I don't know how to say this word. Hypotheses. So once you create I don't know how to say it. So once you why is it so difficult? In this video, I'm going to try to say hypothesis successfully. So once you've made an hypothesis, you can now try to test it out and see if you're right or wrong. But the only way to learn if you're right is by actually testing this and looking at the data. And this will allow you to make the final decision on your idea, on your gut feeling that is not based on only emotions, but actually on real life data. So in this video, I'm going to share our stack of collecting analytics and data from the app, from usage, from what users do, and from performance. I'm going to share with you how we set it up and how we decide what to measure and how to measure it to be effective in helping us make decisions to make the product better, to make the product grow. Now, we are in no way perfect at that. We are still learning as we go, so I will definitely make follow-up videos talking about the things that we learn with some A/B testing that we're starting to do pretty soon. So stay tuned if you want to. Make sure to follow and hit the bell notification so you don't miss the next video in the topic. This video is going to be the basics. In this video, I'm going to go through the tools that we use and how we use them, but more importantly, our process of creating the data stack. There's so much you can track in your different SaaS businesses, apps, whatever, that it's kind of difficult to figure out where to start and how to do that. If you're talking about e-commerce, in e-commerce, it's super simple. There's a specific funnel that you can follow up on. With SaaS, it's a little more complex and it can be a little difficult to measure, so I am here to help, and let's make this simple because a lot of people like to really complicate things when it comes to data and analytics. So let's jump into it and let's begin with our stack, with our tools. I would say there are 5 main tools that we use when it comes to user data and usage data, but I'm going to talk about mainly 3 of them in this video. So let's begin by going over them. The first one is Segment. Segment is something that I think Eric mentioned in a few videos back. Basically, this is a connector. It's a tool that allows you to send data from your app, from whatever source you want from your website, and do some basic manipulation on it and pass this data on to whatever destination you want. So for example, we send data from our app, reconvert into Segment, and then from Segment we send it out to a few different places, and that allows us to have the same data in a few places in different formats and use it in different ways. So let's clear it up by moving forward to the next 3 tools that we use in this stack. These are the next destinations that we send data to from Segment. First is Mixpanel. Mixpanel is an analytics tool that basically allows you to do a lot of reporting for your customers, and I will show you a little bit of our reports later in this video. So Mixpanel is one of the destinations that we send data to from Segment. Another destination is Klaviyo. Klaviyo is an email marketing platform. It is e-commerce centered, but we use it to send out emails to our customers from our SaaS business as well, just because it's very comfortable to use. So this is the second destination. We have Segment sending out to Mixpanel and to Klaviyo. The third destination is Crisp, and Crisp is our help desk and support platform. The reason we send data to Crisp is so our support team can actually see some information about the users when they talk to the customer. They can see details about their store, their usage of the app, etc., and that allows them to give better support while asking less questions from the customers because they already have some of the basic answers. So these are 4 of the 5 tools. The last tool is not actually integrated into any of that. This is the planning tool. We use Notion to plan out the data structure and how to send it and when. You can use something like Google Sheets, totally fine. You don't have to use Notion, but I have found that it's more comfortable comfortable to do it on Notion because then you can create some different statuses and color them differently, and you don't have to do any Excel calculations for that. It's just out of the box in Notion. So up to you, definitely. But you need some sort of table format to be able to organize that. So in this video, like I said, we're not going to focus on all of that. If you want me to talk more about the parts that I'm not going to focus on, let me know in the comments, and we definitely will make a video about it. But right now we're going to focus on taking the data from the app through Segment and into Mixpanel. And then once it's in Mixpanel, how we can start actually measuring some of the things that we want to measure to improve the app. Let's go. So there are 5 steps to setting up your data structure in Segment and actually start measuring it and using it. The first step is deciding what to measure. I know there are so many metrics that you could look into. There are so many ways to kind of measure, is your app successful or not? What can you do to improve? That you can kind of get lost into all of that. And we don't want that. The best way to actually simplify things is to narrow them down. So narrow it down and think about the step in the funnel that you want to look into right now. Don't think about the entire funnel. Don't think about the entire user lifetime, what they do with the app, every single action. Think about a specific area that you want to improve. So the easiest way to do it is to break down the funnel, the customer life cycle. We would start with conversion rate and activation rate, move on to retention and churn. How well are you holding onto your customers? And next we can do cost per acquisition. And then with this data, we can actually do lifetime value, your customer's LTV. And lastly, you can move on to MRR or ARR and actually look in revenue. So you really want to break each of these parts down and make sure you do it incrementally so you don't actually have to think of everything in advance. We actually have a video talking all about the metrics that you want to measure when you're first starting out. We'll link it up here and you can check it out if you're not sure where to start. But the sake of the example in this video that we're going to follow up on, this video will measure our activation rate. I'm going to demonstrate everything on Reconvert, and I'm going to show you how we measure the activation rate of the app, meaning the percentage of people that ended up enabling the app and activating it out of the people who installed it. This is what we're testing now. Step 2 is defining the data. In the next step, you want to actually start doing some of the planning work. This is where Notion comes into play. So you want to think about, all right, I want to check activation status. This is what I want to measure. I want to measure where I am standing right now as far as activation status. What data do I need to know about the customer to actually be able to measure it? Since we're working with Segment, let me introduce 2 terms that are related to Segment. There are a few different events and properties types that you can send out to Segment, but we will focus on the two main ones. One is identify, which is a way for you to identify user. This is how you say, okay, this is this user. And then you send out the information about the user in the form of properties. So I can send out an identify call and say, this is the ID of the user, the email of the user, and whatever other properties I want. I could say this user has the app right now activated. It has the app installed. It approved payment. You can really set out for each user the different properties that you want to know about them when you are doing any kind of cuts and reporting on Mixpanel. The second thing is track. Track is an event. You send that out when something happens. So for example, the user just installed. So when a user installed the app, I will send a track event to Segment. And then when the user approved payment, I will send another tracking event. This is the main concept. You do need to know that for both identify and track, you can send out different properties. When you send out a property in the identify form, then it saves it to the customer. When you send a property for the track method, then it saves it for the event, not on the user level, meaning the user will not have any of these properties saved, which is why a lot of the times you would want to send out an identify with a track event. For example, let's say the app was enabled. I will send out an app enabled event, but I also want to update the user properties to let me know from now on that the app is enabled in this user's account. So I will send out an identify and change the app enabled to true, enabled, whatever status you want to give it. I know it's kind of all over the place. Let's jump into it. I'll show you a sample of how we set this up in Notion. So this is a sample of what our segment setup looks like in Mixpanel. You can see that I have the name. So this would be the name of the property or the event that I'm sending. We have the type. In this case, it's an event. We have a trigger, what makes this event happen, what makes it run, go over it soon, properties, and source and destination. We can ignore source for now for a second and mostly focus on destination. Where do I want this data to end up in? Klaviyo, Mixpanel, Google Ads, Facebook Pixel. Segment has all of these. So where am I planning for this event to go? It would matter later on when you plan technically how to send it. Status, it is mainly important when you have a lot of events already and you want to track it. So you want to know, is this something new or is this something existing that I made changes for, or what is the status here? So first event is app installed. The user just installed the app. We want to send an app installed event. And then the properties would be the user ID, which is what I use to actually connect these events to the same user, date and time, store name, store URL, referring affiliate, if there's an affiliate here, number of monthly orders. We send this out because this is how we charge customers. So it helps us to kind of predict, is this going to be a paid customer or a free customer? What is going to be their plan? Their Shopify plan, their phone number, any information that is relevant about the customer. So this is on app installed. Let's say we install the app. What is the next step? In Reconvert, the next step would be payment approval, pop-up view. Because we have a pop-up explaining payment approval, explaining what our payment plans are built as. Now in here, I would do the same thing. I would say, I want to see user ID, and I want, of course, the date and time. I want all of these things. And that's pretty much it. And then we have a payment pop-up. Next click, let's say next click, which there's a button there that basically allows them to say, okay, click next. And here again, I'm gonna just keep the same things. Next, payment approval. Payment approved. So this happens when the user actually clicked payment approved on Shopify. If you are taking credit cards, then you would maybe have a different flow here, of course. So here I want to do all of these, and maybe here I also want to add again the number of monthly orders, just so I can later on kind of check it out and plan it. Another thing I would add here is payment plan version. We have in Reconvert a few different testing plans that we're always running. So I want to know for reporting, what is the payment plan version? Have I changed that since this user installed or not? Next step for us would be quick activation click. For example, I'm not being very accurate on our funnel here, but it's close enough. So let's say they clicked quick activation. Now they start activation. Next would be new funnel created. So let's say the user created a new funnel. Here, I want to know some extra stuff. So I do want to know all the basics, but I also want to know things like, did this user create a funnel manually or through the automatic onboarding? So let's say source, and then the source could be either automatic onboarding or manual. What else do I want to know? Maximum discount percentage, which is a feature in our activation flow that allows them to set up the maximum discount, etc. I think you got it from here. Next step would be app enabled, and then we finish the onboarding, and then the next step would probably be payment received, just to see that the customer stayed with me for a whole month, because this is our free trial period. So let's just do one sample. Of course, this is not a full thing, but it's a sample. Let's do one sample of an identify. So first of all, this here would be identify, the type. And let's say it's the store email. And I want to send this out on app installed. Okay, so as you can see, for the events, I didn't use trigger. And the reason I didn't use trigger is because the event itself is a trigger. This event happened, send this event out. But for identifies, there is no trigger. You're changing a user's information. So on app installed, I want to send out the email, and also if the user updated it. So I think we have a store details change kind of a thing. No, maybe user detail change. Okay, store details change. I'll create a new one. And then let's say I want to send out also the number of monthly orders. Now this one is interesting because I can send it on app installed, of course, why not? And I can also send it on payment received. So whenever a user pays us, because not every month they'll have the same amount of orders, whenever they pay us, we can update how much orders they had the past month. So this is just a sample. Again, there's a lot you can do. What I basically like to do is go into the app properties, into the event properties, and think about which one of them would be which one of the properties would be relevant as a user property, and a lot of the times most of them are. So think about it like this. This is it as far as the Notion setup thing. So we've defined the data, now we're moving on to step number 3, and step number 3 is about syncing this to Segment. At this point you will give your developers the Notion document and the documentation from Segment. Segment has great documentation. We are using a JavaScript source for the app, if that means anything to you. If not, that's okay. I basically gave my developers the documentation. They told me, okay, we can do it with a JavaScript source. We created one and they started doing it. As far as the technical aspect of it, it's not complex. It's just about calling a specific event whenever something happens in the app. Just have them set this up, and then you can use the Segment debugger to test it out. And I can show you a little bit what it looks like. Let's go into Segment. So this is Segment. Let's just do a quick overview. As you can see here, we have the sources and the destinations, and we have a few of them. A lot of these are things that we tested that we don't really use anymore. So I'm gonna go into Reconvert app, server-side production. This is the one we use. As you can see, it's connected to a few different places. The main ones are Mixpanel, Klaviyo, and Crisp, but we do have other connectors. So to test this out, I'm gonna go into debugger. Okay, so this is the debugger, and in here I can actually see a lot of the latest events. Now you will not be able to see everything here. This is just a debugger. If you want to see all the events, you're gonna need to go to your destination, things like Mixpanel, for example. So you can see here that the different events are being actually sent, and then you can check out what they look like and what properties are being passed to make sure that it works properly and correctly. Again, not going to waste time going over this part. If you want a more detailed instructions and kind of go over the actual technical process of how we set everything up, let me know. But here's a good example. We have an app installed event, and we can actually look at the different information that we send out on app installed. The first step is to actually connect your segment to Mixpanel. And Mixpanel has a really nice free plan that you can use and work with for a while before you have to upgrade. Same for Segment, by the way, which is why we are now paying both of them because they are doing good on their freemium. They're like giving you a lot of value for free before you have to pay. Just something to consider. So just connect Segment to Mixpanel, and then we can jump into Mixpanel and actually see how to tie this all together. So once we connected Mixpanel, the last step is to actually use Mixpanel, build some reports on top of that, figure out where we stand right now and what we need to improve. And I am going to keep on with the example that I gave throughout this video of the activation funnel. So I have an activation funnel report here on Mixpanel. Let's look at it and kind of understand what we can learn from it and how we built it. All right, so the activation funnel. Let's look at this and kind of try to read it out. First of all, you define the different steps of the activation. In this case, I have the app installed, and then the next one is approve payment click, and these are all events that I'm sending from Segment. And next is payment approved, and then app enabled, and then payment received. Now, we do have some more steps in between. In Reconvert, possibly in your app as well. For example, between payment approved and app enabled, there are steps of creating a funnel and start using the app, and only then do they actually enable it. But I wanted to keep it simple right here to give me an overview of where the drop happens. A few more things. Conversion criteria allows you to define when your conversion happens. In my case, it's about 31 days because after 31 days, they actually pay. For the first 30 days, they don't. And as you can see, I finished the funnel with a payment received event. So I need to wait for it to appear. One important thing to note is we send out payment received even if the amount is zero, even if it's a free plan, just so we know that this user stayed with us and we can create reporting and kind of see what's going on with this user on a monthly basis. Lastly, we have a filter, and I set out a filter of monthly orders greater than 49 because these are our paying customers. I can remove this and then I will have an overview of all of our customers, but I actually want to look at only the paying ones, and this is a user property that I send out through Identify. So the filter is an Identify property and the steps are all events that I sent. Now looking at the actual table here, at the actual graph, we have a 6 months filter. You can make it more or less, and we can see that we have app installed, approved payment click, payment approved, app enabled, and payment received. So we used to have actually a huge drop between the app installed to actual payment approval. And we used to have this drop because the way that our payment is built is that you have to approve payment for the largest plan we have, even though we won't charge you this much, just because of how it's built on Shopify. So we added a pre-payment approved message, which is the approved payment click. It's basically a message explaining the pricing to the customer and kind of alleviating concerns, and it helped. It reduced a lot of the drop. There is still a drop, it's to be expected between steps, but it reduced it a lot. Now you can see that the next drop we have is for payment approval. The fact that we have a drop at payment approval means this would be the area that I am now focusing on. So if I am looking at this graph, this is what I want to test next. What can I do to improve my app activation rate, the actual and app enable rate? I could improve onboarding, either make it shorter, make it clearer. Maybe I can make it not shorter but more customizable, which is not really the instinct I would go with, but it's a nice thing to actually try out, do some A/B testing. So now that I have this report, I can actually start testing out, start collecting hypotheses for the different steps, for the specific step that I'm having issue with, the app enabled step, collect my ideas of what could improve it, rate them up, and start testing. Start testing, send out the reporting back to Mixpanel and see how things are actually working. Am I right with my test? Is it improving this metric or not? And if not, I will move on to the next test and try something else. Now I want to show you that because of the way I set it up, let's say we do send out a lot of events here, more than just this flow, but like I said, I wanted to keep it simple for this video. But just because of this flow and the properties that I send out about it, I can actually also see my customer retention. Let's go back into my dashboard. I actually already created it. So we do have a 12-month retention graph for my paying customers. You can see that I start the retention graph by any event. So it could be app installed, it can be another event, usually it's app installed. And then the next event I'm looking for is payment received, meaning any event can happen and payment received must happen for this store to be defined as retained throughout the specific month. And I do look at the retention criteria every month, and again I filter that only for paying customers. And I can look here into my different customers and see my retention, and I can also see if there is a specific trend. Is there a specific month where my retention is low? I can improve it. I can kind of see why is my performance going down for stores in a specific month, what's going on there. Another thing I can do with my properties is actually do some breakdowns. So let's say I want to compare retention through different Shopify plans. Okay, so I do have the property of Shopify plan. I can do a breakdown, and then you can see in the graph and in my table here that I have the retention divided by Shopify plans, and I can kind of see which plans are staying with me the longest, which are not, and learn from that. I can see a lot of things. I can also divide it according to the number of monthly orders, according to the store vertical, what are they selling, etc. A lot of things to do here. Alright, so these are the 5 steps to getting started with your analytics and getting started actually measuring things for your customers. You want to measure, test, measure again, test again. This is the whole spiel, the whole story. You don't need more than that. You only need to focus on one thing at a time. Don't try to capture everything because you'll get lost. Trust me, if you see what our actual Notion planning for segment looks like right now, mind-blowing. But you want to make sure to keep it simple for the beginning and then build up on top of that. Please let me know in the comments if you want me to do another video talking about our Klaviyo setup and Crisp setup and how we send out information for that, as well as if you want us to share some of the testing that we're running right now in the app and how we're measuring up with Mixpanel and how we're doing that and what we're figuring out there, because that's very exciting and actually really interesting if you ask me. So if you want to learn a little more about what to track and when and how, we do have a video talking about the most important metrics for any SaaS when you're first starting out. You can watch it here, and if you don't want to, this is what YouTube thinks you should watch. Have a great day.